What's up, the Comic Coalition here for another video for you guys today. Now, unless you've been living under a rock, chances are you've tuned in to The Mandalorian on Disney Plus. I'm loving this series so far. It's definitely pulling on the nostalgia strings for me. Now, within the first few episodes, I started noticing something interesting. Really interesting. Some of those nostalgia strings that were being tugged on weren't being tugged on by the fond memories of Star Wars from my childhood. They were actually being tugged on from a whole nother part of pop culture in general. They were being tugged on by a little show that you might know by the name of Samurai Jack. Now, I couldn't quite put my finger on it, but within the first few minutes of episode one, I was like, this really reminds me of something. Yes, it's Star Wars, but it reminds me of something else. And then it hit me. Samurai Jack. So I was like, man, maybe I'm crazy. Maybe I'm just crazy. Why would this remind me of Samurai Jack? Then episode 2 comes around. Boom. I'm like, this really feels like Samurai Jack. So I did a little digging, I did a little research, and comes to find out that The Mandalorian and Samurai Jack have a lot more in common than you might think. Here's 5 things that The Mandalorian and Samurai Jack have in common. Now, as a Star Wars fan, you might be familiar with a guy by the name of Genndy Tartakovsky. He was the creator of the Star Wars Clone Wars animated series that ran from 2003 to 2005. The series consisted of 25 episodes. The first 2 seasons episodes ran from about 2 to 5 minutes, while the third season consisted of 5 15-minute episodes. Now, this guy also created Dexter's Laboratory, worked on the Powerpuff Girls, and also created Samurai Jack. Now, the Star Wars Clone Wars animated series won a bunch of awards, was critically acclaimed, won an Emmy, and the success of the show led to the creation of the 2008 Star Wars The Clone Wars series, the CGI version helmed by Dave Filoni. Now, obviously, this guy, Genndy Tartakovsky, the creator of Samurai Jack and the creator of Star Wars Clone Wars, has worked on the Star Wars property. He's been in the room with George Lucas, and you gotta believe at some point in time he has rubbed elbows with Dave Filoni. Dave Filoni, who is working on The Mandalorian. Now, as I dug a little bit deeper, I got to see that Genndy Tartakovsky has also worked with Jon Favreau. He was actually animated the storyboards for Iron Man 2. Now, as you know, Jon Favreau and Dave Filoni are responsible for The Mandalorian, and right away we see that they have ties with the creator of Samurai Jack, Genndy Tartakovsky. So that right off the bat, send off some alarms like, hey, maybe this show was loosely inspired by Samurai Jack, or maybe they got some of the flavor of the show from Samurai Jack. Number 2, just the overall tone and atmosphere of the show. Both of these shows have a Western futuristic atmosphere about them. Both of them feel dated and old, but also brand new and futuristic. That's something that Samurai Jack nailed to a T, and that's definitely something that Mandalorian is doing right now as well. Both of them feel like an old school Western, but set in a futuristic time. Although these shows both feel like they're set in the future, they also feel, like I said, they feel old school because, it's nothing really shiny, and polished about it. It's nitty and gritty, and that's why I say both of the shows share a similar, atmosphere and a similar tone. So I believe that's one of the main things that they both have in common. I mean, if you watch an episode of Samurai Jack and you watch an episode of The Mandalorian, I think you would understand what I'm trying to say here. So if you have not watched Samurai Jack, I suggest that you check it out, and I guarantee you within the first couple of episodes you'll be able to tell the atmosphere, the show, sometimes even the colors and the lighting are similar to The Mandalorian as well. Number 3. Now, we've only seen a few episodes of The Mandalorian so far, but I've I think it's safe to say that it is a self-contained character study, whereas we don't see anything from the perspective of anyone else in the show but from the Mandalorian's perspective. He is the main character. Everything is centered around him, and you see it from his perspective, and that is the same thing basically with Samurai Jack. Very rarely in Samurai Jack do you ever see anything from anyone else's perspective. It's usually a self-contained story about Samurai Jack himself, and a self-contained character study, if you will. So I believe both of those things are something they also have in common. So far, within the Mandalorian. I mean, I'm not sure where they'll take the show from here on out, but so far it has been a self-contained character study. It has been through the eyes of the Mandalorian. Everything has been through that one central character. Now there are other characters at play, just like in Samurai Jack, but everything is basically through the eyes of the main character at hand. The main characters in both shows are actually have a lot in common as well, and we will go there soon. But that is one thing I wanted to touch on that I believe both shows have in common. Now, both the main characters themselves have a lot in common. Samurai Jack is a lone warrior from an ancient warrior race. He's far from home, doesn't really have his parents. He's on this journey, doesn't really know where the journey is taking him, but he's on a journey. He's a lone wolf, he's a warrior. So is the Mandalorian in a lot of ways. We know at one point in time he was a foundling. Um, who knows where he's come from? You get the sense that he's far from home. No pun intended for Spider-Man, but he's far from home. He's a part of a warrior race. He's this quiet character, just like Samurai Jack. Now that's another thing that these show has in common is where like some episodes of Samurai Jack there's little to no dialogue. Samurai Jack does not talk often. Just like the Mandalorian, you don't see him. He's not a chit chatty fella. I mean, episode 2 there was hardly any dialogue at all, and I would think that episode 2 feels the most like Samurai Jack. So I would suggest that you watch episode 2 and watch a couple episodes of Samurai Jack to see what I'm talking about. But I believe episode 2 felt the most like Samurai Jack for me so far. But yeah, both characters are very quiet. They're badass, they're warriors, come from an ancient warrior race as far as the samurai and the Mandalorians go. And like I said, it's just when you see them on screen, Samurai Jack always did a good job of, even though it's animation, it did a good job of, you knew what Samurai Jack was thinking. You could watch a full episode and see the whole story, and Samurai Jack wouldn't have to say a single word. He would emote his emotions, and you would understand what's going on. And he usually had a pretty stoic face. He didn't have a mask most times, but he had a stoic face. Didn't really show too much emotion on his face. And the Mandalorian's the same way. He has a mask on the whole entire time, so you don't know what his facial expressions are. You don't know the tone of how he's saying things because he's just a stoic, quiet, interesting character. So I would say that is another thing that Samurai Jack and the Mandalorian have in common. And last but not least, the Mandalorian and Samurai Jack are both influenced and inspired by the same things. They're both inspired by the serial westerns from our past. They're both inspired from the samurai films from our past. If you go back and watch like Lone Wolf and Cub or Seven Samurai, or go back and watch Gunsmoke and the old serial westerns, you will see that both of these shows are definitely inspired by them. Also, they're both inspired by Star Wars. I mean, The Mandalorian, of course, it's a Star Wars show, but I would say that it's inspired by the underground of Star Wars that we see in A New Hope when we're in the cantina, that when we see when we're in Jabba's palace and things like that, the nitty gritty, dirty underground of Star Wars. And also, Samurai Jack was inspired by those scenes. I mean, there's plenty of scenes in Samurai Jack where you'll be like, hey, this is definitely inspired by Star Wars. This is just like the cantina scene. Or this is just like Jabba's palace. I mean, Samurai Jack leans on pop culture heavily, and I believe it is heavily inspired by Star Wars. And I know it's weird to say that a Star Wars show is inspired by Star Wars, but The Mandalorian is definitely inspired by a certain part of the Star Wars lore, and Samurai Jack is inspired by that same part of Star Wars as well. And like I said, they're both inspired by the old school samurai films and the old school Western films from our yesteryears. Now, I hope you guys enjoyed this video. Be sure to give it a thumbs up. Be sure to hit that subscribe button. Be sure to share this with your friends. If you can think of anything else that Samurai Jack and the Mandalorian have in common, let me know down in the comments below. Drop a comment down below and let me know your favorite Samurai Jack episode, and let me know what you're thinking about the Mandalorian so far. And as always, you have a good day, YouTube.